All righty. Okay. Next slide, please. Okay. Oh, okay. So we're gonna go to, is anybody here from membership? No one's here for membership. Okay. Then we will move to the education committee. Oh, if you want any information on how to join, you can take your phone and click on that QRL and get all the information you need to join the branch. Next slide, please. All right, quickly, save the date, save the date, save the date. We have our Freedom Fund Gala coming up. We have our Freedom Fund Gala. Hold on one second. Okay, we have our Freedom Fund Gala coming up November 2nd from 5:30 to 9:30. An hour of that time will be for networking. It'll be the cocktail hour. So we'll be networking, getting to know each other, taking pictures, things of that such. The tickets, I'll let Miss Evelyn, our Freedom Fund chair, go more in depth about the goings on for that event, but I will share with you this. We are looking for sponsors. We are actively looking for sponsors. Miss Evelyn or either comms, can one of you all drop the sponsorship packet in the chat? So if you all know of any business, it takes a village. So if any of you know of any businesses that you think will not mind sponsoring, the sponsorship packages are going from $500 to $3,000. So if you know of any businesses or organizations who would potentially like to sponsor, please reach out to them on our behalf. Any company that you all go to and they become sponsors, we will give you a free ticket. We will give you a free ticket to the gala. So that's kind of an incentive to help us out there. I think that's all that I have. Yeah, we can go to the next slide. Okay, is young adults here? Okay, save the date, save the date, save the date. September 28th. If you have boys ages 12 to 18, boys ages 12 to 18, we have a Boys to Men symposium. We'll be at Gum Springs. They will be talking about fatherhood, fatherlessness, mental health, emotional intelligence, a little bit of sex education. We'll have motivational speakers. We'll have a game truck out there. It's going to be a fun-filled day from, I believe, 10 to 3. Gum Springs Community Center, again, if you have any, as a matter of fact, take this to your church. You all should see a constant contact with it. If you all are on our mailing list, forward it to your churches. Let your churches know September 28th, the Fairfax NAACP will have a boys symposium at Gum Springs. Breakfast, lunch, and snacks will be provided. They have to register first because of the content that we have the speakers talking about. We would like for them to register to make sure that the parents know what the subject matter is, but it's just going to be a full day of information, brotherhood, support for our young boys ages 12 to 18. Next slide, please. Okay, this Saturday, this is exciting. As Secretary Michael Bryan showed us, we have 2 awards. I didn't even know about the first award, but we have 2 awards that we are going to be celebrating this weekend at Buffalo Wild Wings. Thank you, Chair Michelle. At Buffalo Wild Wings, Richmond Highway 7732, Richmond Highway, Alexandria, Virginia. Please RSVP. How many people are on here? Okay, we got 29 people on here. So there should be 29 RSVPs because we've already ordered the food. We have drink tickets. We have 1 drink named after us for the event, courtesy of Secretary O'Brien's suggestion. We have a, thanks, Mark. We have 1 drink named after us for the event. So please register for the event. It's going to be 3 to 6. Buffalo Wild wings, drinks, celebration, fellowship, you name it. We're going to be doing it right then and there. So please register. Can you put the register? Is it possible to put the registration link in the chat as well?
Michelle, it looks like I already put that in there.
Oh, that's for that. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Before I move forward, one of the unsung heroes of the branch is our communications committee led by our communications chair. When you all go on Facebook, IG, X, formerly known as Twitter, and you see these posts, it is not myself, Secretary O'Brien, VP Hampton, VP Camblin, none of the committee chairs are posting. None of the committee chairs are creating these flyers, creating these registrations, creating everything you see when you go on Constant Contact. None of us are doing that legwork. That belongs to Chair Michelle Pulliam and her committee. Every graphic that you see, everything that you see on all of our socials, our emails, that comes from Chair Michelle. When you visit our new and improved website, that came from someone who served on her committee. Let's take a moment to really celebrate and thank Chair Michelle and her committee for all the work that they do. There are times where she does our editing when we send out letters to the community, to school board officials, to housing officials, to anybody with a title. Those correspondence comes from Chair Michelle Pulliam. That comes from her and her team. So please, let's just take a moment and give her a clap and thank her and her team for all of the work that they do, because it is thankless and it is a lot. So let's please take a moment and just thank them for everything that they do. And make sure that you all are, when you see something, repost it. Repost. Facebook, Instagram, X, anything that they taking time out to let the community know that what we have going on. If you see it and you agree with it, please repost it, show your support, follow the branch on all of our socials. Let's start the conversation. Let's start being more engaging with one another on our socials, because again, it's not an easy task and we are volunteers. Lastly, before we move on to committee reports, we are hiring. Some of the committees we have, we can use a helping hand. As you all know, NAACP is a very prestigious branch. We win awards, but we work for those awards. Nothing is given to us. So I just want to let you all know that we are hiring. We have a few committees that can use a push because of the work that we do. We have criminal justice, and I'll let Pratik talk more about that as he gives his committee report. But we also have our legal redress. Then we have our, if you are between the ages of 18 and 34, we have our young adults committee. We have different opportunities for volunteerism as well within the branch. So if you are so inclined, you can, if you're interested in criminal justice and want to know more information on it, please chat with Pratik. If you want more information on budget, our budget committee, please enter the chat with Les. Do we have anybody here from legal redress? Okay, nobody here from legal redress. You can chat with me for legal redress. So without further ado, we're gonna move it to, we don't have anybody here from membership this evening, so we're gonna move to Education. Education will be followed by housing if Mary is here. If she's not here, if Mary's not here, education will be followed by criminal justice. Take it away.
Okay. Hi, everybody. I wanted to let you guys know that on this Thursday of this past week, the school board was taking a vote about a comprehensive boundary review for Fairfax County Public Schools and reviewing a policy, a regulation, a policy that they have. It's regulation 8103.7. And that is the policy that dictates boundaries and the schedule for reviewing boundaries. And that, as you can imagine, I don't know if any of you have ever lived through a boundary debate in your community or if you've ever seen that, but boundaries is always a huge, huge issue. It's seriously polemic. It causes a lot of anxiety in a lot of communities. Some people will say that, well, I moved into this community to go to this school, right? And then they redistrict, and then you have to go to a different school. It causes a lot of anxiety for families, and a lot of people feel fairly entitled to, though they're public schools, they feel fairly entitled to the school that they imagine that they were going to go to. And also in the United States, as you know, I'm sure all of you now know about redlining and the way that communities have been that have been segregated within communities. So Fairfax County is absolutely a segregated community, whether it's official or not. We have people who are areas that are concentrated, mostly this culture, mostly that culture, mostly this demographic, live in particular areas. And there will be that will end up having a big impact on boundaries. So the school board meeting, they were going to take this vote to do several changes to the boundaries. First, they were going to make changes that would require that the school board would get to vote on every boundary change, because right now the way the policy had been written, the schools had a lot more latitude to do that without votes from the school board. The new policy would take into consideration proximity, transportation ease, and keeping communities together when they make these when they would make these boundaries decisions as well, because we have in this community some kids who will, in my community, for example, we have a school that is 7 minutes away, about 3 miles away, and we are boundaried to another school that is several miles away and an hour drive. We're boundaried to that school because it has fewer minorities. So if you, this community was up in arms, and in fact, the entire auditorium was filled to capacity with people from my neighborhood who were concerned about, they're really only concerned about one boundary, the Langley-Herndon boundary in the northwestern part of the county. That's what they were concerned about. So all that community, the whole auditorium of Luther Jackson was filled. And it wasn't from people from all over the county. It was from people from this particular area with this particular school in mind. But there are boundary issues all over the county, certainly not just here. And there are overcrowding issues. So the board did vote to do the comprehensive boundary change, which we wanted them to do, and they did vote for that. However, it ended up being just totally chaotic, and those of you who followed the school board and have followed the school board for several years might have thought that this newly elected group of school board members, that they would be less fractious or chaotic, that it would be a better board. There is no evidence that it's a better board. It is, however, seems to be less openly fractious, but there are other issues, and it was very unpleasant to see. So there are details. I won't get into all the details, but unfortunately, there seems to be some unwillingness of the board to actually do their main job, which is governance over schools. So the main job of the board is to be the superintendent's boss. That is the job of the board. So they direct the school, the superintendent, of what to do. They give her the directives, and they are actually the ones who are governing the superintendent. So they're the superintendent's boss. And what I saw at the school board meeting was giving Dr. Reed just pretty much free license to do whatever she wants to do with regard to the boundary review, saying things like openly openly saying things like, oh, it's such a wonderful superintendent as we have. With a wonderful superintendent like this, we really don't have to worry about this. We don't have to worry about that. Where Dr. Anderson had put in some amendments to assure that phasing would be done in a careful manner, to assure the mental health, to sort of help the mental health of students who we already know the mental health has been struggling severely since COVID, to keep the upper grades within a cohort, elementary school, middle school, high school, that they would have the opportunity, if they chose, to stay in that school and finish in that school and only transfer to the next school after having finished in their cohort. That would allow, it might take a year, as she put it might take a year or two longer to get through every school in the rebounding, but you would be doing so much good for the mental health of the students. And she had gotten all the approval from all of her school board members. They all were, they seemed to have the votes, and she was ready to vote on that. And then Kyle McDaniel introduced from the dais a new amendment that just dropped into their lap that day, that he had been clearly doing some, getting enough votes without talking to Dr. Anderson or Melanie Marin or Ilrong Moon, who all the three, there were 3 votes against the rest of the board on all of these. And it was just really unprofessional. It was a terrible way to, it was really unfortunate after seeing as much as we've seen in the prior board of this sort of like underhandedness. It was unfortunate to see. I wasn't pleased. And that's something that we have to watch for, because if the school board is not looking out after what the superintendent is doing, then somebody has to be looking out for what the superintendent is doing, and it might have to be us. We had our own caveats. We were concerned when she was hired. We made that very clear, very vocally clear, and we just need to be able to follow through on that. So that's one thing that you might hear some stuff from the education committee about. Keep that in mind. In addition to that, with regard to the boundaries, something that we might have to be looking at is when they do this comprehensive boundary review, which they are going to do, with notions of transportation ease and proximity and community in mind, you will, of course, in a segregated community like this, income segregated, racially segregated, demographically segregated, you will end up with concentrations of high poverty schools, naturally, because we have communities that are concentrations of high poverty communities, right? There are, like along Route 1, that's a high poverty area. And if you're talking about proximity, you're going to end up having schools that have a lot more poverty in them than they do now, where we bus communities hither and yon to make sure that we kind of try to make a little bit of a mix. And if we're not going to be doing that, because that's not in that issue about having an economic mix is not in the policy, but proximity and transportation ease is. So in that case, we have to make sure that they are planning for that. And if they're planning for that, what are they like? Are you actively planning for high poverty schools? You need to do that. The schools do need to be ready for that to happen, because you are doing this review. To be ready for that to happen, we have lots of evidence of how to have what are called 90-90-90 schools, which are 90% poverty, 90% minority, and have 90% pass rates or whatever state standard exams, whatever they are. They do very well academically. There is evidence of that. We know how to do that. Are we prepared to take the measures that would be required to do that if we have high poverty schools? So that is the update on the boundaries. That's really top of mind. I'm not ready to, there's another sort of issue that I'm not quite ready to, I don't know what's going to happen with it, so I don't want to report it to you. There's a Montessori preschool situation that's going on, but I don't know what actually is going to be happening with that, so I don't want to report on that. And that is what I have to say about that. Any questions? Okay, let's see, we don't have questions.
Dr. Hampton, I am not surprised at the discombobulation that's going on with the schools committee. I'm very disappointed with their behavior, with the way they're governing their actions, of how they regard the schools and input from the communities to, well, in your instance, they had to listen because the auditorium was full of them. But it's been a disappointment this new selection of school board members, or the current ones, it's been very disappointing to see the decisions that they've made. So that's all I wanted to say.
It is very disappointing, and it's unfortunately, I mean, you know, I don't want to be sitting here, committee chair, vice president, dishing on the school board, sounding kind of nasty about that. But I'm just saying, I'm not trying to be gossip mongering and dishing like that. But it is, I mean, you know, you've heard me say this. I always say it, like, if you know you get elected for office, it would be great if you got elected to office and you kind of didn't care so much whether you were elected again, I guess. I don't know. But in this particular case, to be honest with you, the majority voted completely against what that auditorium full of people wanted. The auditorium full of people that were, again, there's just a small minority of the population. It's just my neighborhood, basically. It was all full, but it was all full from Northwestern Fairfax County. They did not want them to make any changes to this 8103 regulation. They didn't want that. They wanted to, they kept saying, pause, you don't have enough information. You don't have enough. They were calling out, they were screaming, they were yelling at people. They had to be escorted out. It was a banana pants meeting. It was terrible. It was a terrible meeting, very ugly. But they did not want these changes to be voted on. And so really, they wanted a pause, but the school board did vote to make the changes. But the only problem is that they did not deal in a professional way with regard to these very clear amendments that Dr. Anderson, she's Mason District School Board member, wanted to put in place regarding phasing in to protect children. And instead, we're deferring all responsibility for that to the superintendent. And in fact, the Springfield member, his name is Sandy Anderson, different Anderson, she kept saying, Dr. Reed, I have a question. Would you do everything that you could possibly do to make sure that you were able to keep kids in schools if you know, at the higher grades? Would you try everything you could? And Dr. Reed very much said, I try, just like that. I'd try, but it's like when I was talking with President Zimmerman about this, explaining this, I said, it's like if you've been given the charge to build a house, and I tell you, build a house, but it has to be using these materials, it has to be this tall, it has to be this wide, and it has to go on this footprint. Or I can tell you, build a house anywhere, anyhow, with whatever you want, just build a house. And you're the person who has to build the house. Of course you're going to vote for the second way. Okay, sure, I'll just build a house because there are no parameters on that house. It's a lot easier to build a house. I can just build it out of sticks and stones or whatever. I can build it out of mud. I can build it out of whatever. And you're not going to say anything because all you asked me to do is build a house, right? And as Dr. Anderson kept saying, if this is important to us, if the mental health of our students is important to us, if transitions are important to us, if we understand how important friendships are to our children, let's codify this. If this is important, let's put it in the code. You see, when you're a governing body, that's your responsibility. Put it in the code. That's your responsibility. Not willy-nilly whoever, because what if Dr. Reed is not what if she does do a great job, but then the next superintendent does not have that codified and just goes willy-nilly whatever, you know? So it was a lack of professionalism that was shocking.
Well, thank you so much, VP Hampton. Do we have any questions for VP Hampton before we move forward? Hearing none. Anybody from housing? Housing. Going once, going twice. Housing. Okay, CJ, followed by Freedom Fund.
Hey everyone. Yeah, so the biggest thing from the last month was our meeting with Chief Public Defender Don Budarak. We talked about a lot of different topics, but the biggest topic that came up was the Commonwealth Attorney's Office. We've noticed some troubling things from that office, and it was almost disheartening to have that confirmed by the public defender. There's been a lot of lack of follow through with the Commonwealth Attorney's Office. They have a lot of policies, which on paper are great, regarding no cash bonds, regarding plea bargaining. But in reality, the line prosecutors who actually try those cases really fail to uphold those policies and really fail to uphold the standards that Steve Giscano, the Commonwealth Attorney, says his office is flowing through on. So it's disappointing for me. I used to be a big supporter of Descano, but it's disappointing to see that this office really isn't upholding that standard. There's a lack of training, there's a lack of transparency. I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done to have the Commonwealth Attorney's Office be meeting the goals that they say that they're supposedly meeting. So I know that we are planning to meet with Descano sometime in the near future. I'll be sure to bring all of these points up with him. I do want to say that I am glad that the Commonwealth Attorney's Office on paper does support a lot of criminal justice reforms, but it is disappointing to see that they're just not followed through on, that they're failing on this, and people get sent to jail because of it. People get wrongfully convicted because of it. So I really want, and I really hope that this office does eventually get the funding they need or whatever to have the adequate training for the line prosecutors to make sure that their policies are upheld. But yeah, I'll be sure to bring all these points up with Commonwealth Attorney Descano whenever we meet him in the near future. But yeah, I think that's it for me.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Any questions for CJ?
I have one. In your upcoming meeting, will you ask about the status of the Timothy Johnson case?
Yeah. Okay.
Can't hear you. You're on mute.
Sorry. Yeah, that is definitely something that we intend to follow through with on. I haven't personally heard anything in a couple of months, so I'll definitely bring that up. And I know that they are working on it. Like, it's not like the case has been dropped or anything. I know it's active. So I'll see what we get with that, and I'll definitely report back.
Excuse me, I just wanted to say too, a little bit ago, it sounds like Descano's office was bleeding prosecutors, like people were just leaving left and right. Is that still happening? Because
Yeah,
Pia left.
there are some like systemic problems in that office. I'm not saying it's all Descano's fault, but it's like there is definitely like a clear lack of training that I've heard from people who used to work with him, that I've heard from the public defender's office, that I've heard from like private defense attorneys. So there are just like a lot of problems from Descano's office. And that high turnover is a result of just bad training, and people who work there don't feel like they can develop their skills, which just creates a cycle of people leaving, and then there's more bad training, and then there's like people leaving. So it's just, that's something we need to figure out. And we talked about that before, and it's hard to get a clear answer because I'm not sure if even like Descano knows like what's happening exactly. So we're just trying to figure out as well.
Thanks for mentioning that. Okay.
Anything else?
Yeah, hey, Pratik, Mike O'Brien here. I've been trying to get your attention the last couple of days about the fact that the foot pursuit policy is going to be coming up tomorrow at the One Fairfax Roundtable, and I was hoping to get some input from you before.
I emailed you a couple hours ago. I'm not sure if you've seen, but we mostly just want to echo.
Okay.
Just echo what the Matrix Working Group was working on, and just emphasizing better data collection anytime there is a foot pursuit. Everything regarding what the charge was to what like the ethnicity of the person was and what the age was. Just more data.
Okay, so kind of confirm what the Matrix Group had recommended. There are a couple of people from the Matrix Group on the roundtable, so I'm sure their positions will be pushed forward. But also, then you're suggesting more data, more complete data.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Awesome. I think Mark has a question in the chat about the foot pursuit question. I think maybe Mike might be better equipped to answer that. That's something the roundtable is working on regarding a policy that they're working with FCPD on, and just it'll be a policy on when they can like do foot pursuits and when they would be able to. It fits into like the broader conversation of use of force that we're working on.
Right, if I can just jump in, Mark, the One Fairfax Roundtable has been charged now with taking up a lot of issues that the Board of Supervisors has punted regarding kind of a lot of policing issues that came out of the Equitable Policing Recommendations Committee that was formed by the Board of Supervisors after the Timothy Johnson shooting. So they came up with something like 52 different recommendations. And instead of really taking them one by one, the Board of Supervisors just punted and pushed it over to this new group called the One Fairfax Roundtable, focusing on implementation of all the equity type issues throughout the county. And so now the first thing that comes before the roundtable, we've just formed in April. I am the NAACP's representative on that group. And just as we are forming, we are being asked now to look at the foot pursuit policy. And hopefully we'll get what the matrix group was actually asking for. Or at least we'll push it forward. That's the idea.
All
Thank
right. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Just saying thank you.
All right. Any other questions before we move forward? Freedom Fund, followed by budget, then followed after budget. We would do unless you can introduce a speaker, but Freedom Fund, take us away.
Oh, thank you, President Zimmerman. Hello, everybody. Good evening. Just a few updates on the Freedom Fund. We're progressing quite nicely. I want to emphasize what President Zimmerman just said about if you can secure someone, a business, a bank, and a organization like a Divine Nine, anybody who wants to provide sponsorship, we have the sponsorship packet and we would greatly appreciate it. We're trying to be able to pay for the entire event with sponsorship money. And if you do have a person or company that or organization that provides sponsorship, we are going to give you a free ticket to the event. It promises to be wonderful DJs, spoken word, all lovely vendors, wonderful cakes. So it's going to be amazing, but we really do need to focus. I do need some help, or Freedom Fund does need help in getting additional sponsors. President Zimmerman has done a great job. I've brought in a couple of sponsors, and we have a member of the Freedom Fund, Ms. Smith, who joined the ranks yesterday to try to help out with this effort. So all the help we can get with sponsorship is wonderful. We've had contact with the awardees. We've selected who we're going to give special awards to. We are working closely with the Treasury Committee, because we want to make sure that we maintain a budget that is reasonable. We want to win. I'm sorry, I was distracted. We want to be able to pay for our event and then have monies left over for our funding to fund the projects that are being put on, like the Black and Boys event coming on. And then what's the last thing? Yeah, I think that's basically it. If anyone needs sponsorship, or if anybody wants to contact me directly, I'll put my email in the chat. And if you have some questions you want to talk about offline, feel free to contact me. But we are moving along nicely, and we hope to see all of you at the Freedom Fund in November. Thank you. Thank you, President.
Miss Evelyn, can you Mark needs a copy of the packet. Can you resend the packet through the chat? Mark, what is NOVA NPHC?
So we're the National Panhellenic Council of Northern Virginia, the umbrella or umbrella group for all the D9 groups in Fairfax, Arlington, Alexandria, and Falls Church.
Okay, we need that for our boys symposium. We actually the Man Up is coming. Alpha Scholars are coming. Kappa League, Omega U. So we're fostering those relationships. So we got another relationship we can talk to you about.
Wonderful.
Yeah, and thank you for coming to the meeting tonight. Miss Evelyn, I'm
Yes,
sorry, would you
ma'am.
say Mark?
Nope, just saying no problem at all.
Okay, thank you. Miss Evelyn, who are the recipients of the awards? Can you share that with us, or are you
Oh,
saving that for the night?
No. The recipients will be, okay, what's the, I don't want to say the incorrect name of the church. Harvest Assembly Church. The Freedom Fund Committee member has, excuse me, contacted Anthony Amos, who is a member of the Springfield district office as the young adult, and then the shelter home or the shelter house. Diana, am I saying it correctly? The
Shelter House, yes.
Yes, the Shelter House is the name of the organization who does wonderful community service to those who are in need of housing and job opportunities. They're doing amazing things. I went to a fundraiser with them. Diana and I went to a fundraiser with them this past couple of months, and just to hear the amazing things that they've done for families, and to see the families now be able to stand on their own 2 feet and provide services, provide for themselves a home, a job. It is just a miracle. It's wonderful what they're doing for the community. So those are our 3 awardees.
Oh,
And of
that's
course,
awesome.
thank you.
Okay, before we go to budget, really quick, Chair Michelle, I believe you had something you wanted to bring to the group. Or is that something else?
Actually, that was for the XCOM, and
okay.
and I'll send you a copy of that email.
Okay,
But I did
thank you.
just put the link to the sponsorship packet in the comments.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Okay, Les, we're gonna do budget, and then Les is all you. This is all you now, Les. Les is in charge. Get your popcorn.
All right, good evening, everyone. As far as the budget committee is concerned, President Nikki made an appeal earlier. I will repeat the appeal that I would really love some additional members to help me on the budget committee. I've been a committee of one for, well, over a year or so. And I think that with additional help, we can expand and really just get much more done. So I make that appeal to everyone. I'm not going to take a lot of time tonight because we have our speaker, and really just from a calendar standpoint, we are Fairfax County is in its fiscal year 2025 budget, which started on July 1st. It only seemed months ago when I was making when there was a public hearing where we're making appeals to the county executives board for funding and issues that are of concern to us. So without further ado, okay. Our special guest speaker tonight is Mr. Philip Hagen. He's the director of the Fairfax County Department of Management and Budget. He was appointed in November 2022, and he's been with the department since 2019, previously serving as deputy director. He holds a bachelor's degree in finance from the University of Florida. I was kidding him earlier. He's a Florida Gator, and I'm a University of Tennessee Vols fan, so we kind of go ahead and SEC on that one. And he holds a master's in public administration from George Mason University. Under his leadership, the DMB is responsible for coordination of the county's annual budget process, including the financial forecast, preparation of the advertised budget plan, supportive deliberations by the Board of Supervisors, and preparation of the adopted budget plan, which exceeds $10 billion for all funds, including over $5 billion for general fund disbursements. Just as a little background about what this department that he heads, the Department of Management Budget, its mission is to provide financial and analytical consultant services, develop, implement, and monitor the county's financial plan, and produce information for agencies, the Board of Supervisors, the county executive, and citizens in order to maintain the county's fiscal integrity and accountability, as well as supporting effective decision-making. For those interested afterwards, they can go into the Fairfax County website and put in budget, and there's a lot of information there that's disposable for everyone, very transparent. So over the years, the NAACP, along with its civil rights organizations, have advocated funding for those priorities, housing, education, and legal justice. So tonight, we're looking forward to gaining a better understanding of the budget process, how it works, and how it impacts our community. I would ask that you hold your questions till the end. And it would also be helpful if you put your questions in the chat directly to me. So I will now hand it over to Mr. Hagen.
Thank you, Les. And thank you for that introduction. And I'm going to see if I can share my screen again. There we go. Hopefully everybody can, there we go. Hopefully everybody can see that now.
Yes.
Excellent. So normally when we give our presentations to community groups, typically it's during our budget season. And so this is, since we're not actually, I don't currently have a budget product out there. As Les said, what I thought I'd bring to you tonight would be talking more about just kind of the overall process, what we do, how we do it, what our timelines are, with a little bit of context regarding the 25 budget, as well as what we're looking ahead for in 2026. So to start out, just some basic facts about our budget. Our fiscal year runs from July to June, and so as Les said, we just started our fiscal year 2025 a few weeks ago on July 1st. We are required by law to have a balanced budget, meaning that our resources must cover our disbursements, and so we can't operate with the deficit like the federal government can, balancing against future generations. We must balance within the current year. And then as well, the Board of Supervisors, our elected officials, they are the final authority on the budget. My department certainly works with the county executive to develop the proposed budget, the advertised budget. And that certainly is the draft budget that the board works from. But the board itself is responsible for adopting the budget each year. We're working on the budget year round, really. As I said, FY 2025 just started, but we are already working on developing our FY 2026 budget, which will start a year from now, July 1, 2025. And so this is our general timeline for the development of the 2026 budget. I'd note that I don't have quite all the dates filled in here yet on the little drop downs on the bottom. The board dates for next year aren't final yet. And actually, unless I've missed it, I don't think their draft calendar has even come out yet. That'll be coming out a little bit later this month. But the dates tend to fall around the same time period, just depending on when the Tuesdays fall and also getting hit by a little bit by the school calendar. But now through the fall, as you see those orange and green months, this is when county agencies, they're working to develop their budget submissions. Those submissions, they'll highlight any of their funding needs or adjustments that they might have. During this time period, we're also working with the Department of Tax Administration, as well as some of the other agencies that they collect revenue, trying to refine our revenue estimates. And so the first kind of public touch point in the FY 2026 budget is in November, when we'll provide a joint fiscal forecast to the Board of Supervisors as well as the school board. And that'll give an update on where we see revenues coming in, as well as what the expenditure requirements will be both on the county and the school side. November through January, then those, I guess it's a shade of blue there, those months. That's really when we hunker down and we're working closely with the county executive to really sort through all those requests from agencies and trying to figure out what will actually be in that advertised budget that he presents then kind of late February. I think that's usually probably the third Tuesday in February is when we tend to present the advertised budget. So then that really kicks off the public facing portion of the budget process. Definitely what the Board of Supervisors will say is budget season. Again, every month is budget season for me. But that begins in again, mid to late February with the release of the advertised budget. From there, there's a 2 or 3 month period where the board holds town hall meetings to solicit feedback from the budget. They're certainly looking to interact with individuals and groups in the community to find out their stance on the budget and where they see things are lacking. All that culminates in the public hearings in mid-April. The board then adopts the budget. Usually in early May, the statutory deadline for adopting the budget is May 15th. And so then while we're working on the future year budget, the FY 2026 budget, we're also continuing to manage the current year's budget, the FY 2025 budget. So having just started fiscal year 2025, our first major task is to perform the carryover review, which that looks at the funds left over from the prior year, fiscal year 2024. And we use those to adjust the current year budget. Usually we're looking at one-time funding needs, capital projects, IT projects, things like that don't have a recurring impact. Although certainly there are situations where we end up needing to make adjustments that do have a recurring impact. And so my office is working on the carryover review right now, and we'll be presenting that to the board at the end of this month. I believe it's July 30th, I want to say. The board then will act on the carryover review in late September. In some years, it bleeds over into early October when they take action on it. Our other quarterly review where we adjust the budget is the third quarter review, which happens in the spring. That's our last chance to modify the budget before the end of the fiscal year. Third quarter is presented to the board each March, and then the board considers that and acts on that review while working on the development of the new budget. It really goes along in the same time frame. The public hearings on the third quarter review are at the same time as the next year's budget. Often they're making decisions that kind of impact both of those processes at the same time. So as Les said in the introduction, our county's budget for all funds totals over $10 billion, but most of our conversation each year focuses on just the general fund, which is about half that amount. The general fund, it tends to be where revenues like real estate taxes flow in. Those revenues have broad flexibility in how they're used, whereas some other things like solid waste fees, if you pay for solid waste collection, those revenues are tied to solid waste service. And so general fund tends to be where the revenues are that have broad availability is what they could be used for. Therefore, there's also more decisions that need to be made regarding how those funds are used. We certainly have lots of other funds outside the general fund. I mentioned the solid waste funds, also transportation funds, capital project funds. And so this chart is breaking down those different groups in a fairly simplified way. I'll say the next slide I show is much more complex, but showing the same thing. So the smallest circle, the gray one, that represents direct spending by general fund agencies like the fire and police departments, libraries, also central service agencies like my own. A lot of the things that you might think of as kind of like those core government agencies that you think your general taxes should support. The middle circle, then the light blue one, adds in transfers from the general fund to some of the other funds like schools, Metro, the Community Services Board. That light blue circle represents the full general fund. And again, that's the $5 billion number where most of the conversation centers as we work through the budget process. And then that largest blue circle is the total budget that includes all funds, and that totals $10.35 billion this fiscal year. And so as I said, this next slide, essentially showing the same thing, but a lot busier. Actually, let me get my mouse over here to point out. When we talked about that smallest gray circle, that's just general fund direct agencies, that would just be these right over here. And we look at the total general fund, the $5 billion, that's this area right here. And so again, that's where most of our conversation is. We do have a complex fund structure with many funds outside of that general fund. And so this is just showing a sample of those other funds. Those with the arrows are just indicating some of those where the transfers from the general fund go, where they receive at least part of their support from general fund. In some cases, they have other revenue sources as well that supplement the general fund transfers. But you can see here again, a number of examples are schools funds, which are the orange funds. We have construction funds, reserve funds, wastewater and solid waste funds. So then what's involved in formulating our budget each year? So we're a very large organization. Our starting point as we look at the budget for next year is always the current year's adopted budget, as that's kind of the baseline level of funding that is required to support our operations. We do look for savings and efficiencies each year. We certainly, in the past couple of years, had a significant push to look for those savings since we're facing some tight budgets. We tend to talk, though, in terms of the adds and subtracts from the prior year. And so as we're developing the budget is really about balance. Some of our largest funding needs that we face each year are certainly employee compensation increases, both for county and schools employees. We also look at things like our contractual and legal obligations, like debt service payments. And then also some of the other needs that have been identified either by the board, by county agencies, also by the community. But all of that has to be balanced against the impact on taxpayers, and particularly with the way our county is structured, the impact on real estate taxes. The focus on real estate taxes, a lot of that comes down to the Dillon rule. And so it's a really important concept that restricts what we can do. Virginia is a Dillon rule state. The Dillon rule, it's a legal concept established by the Supreme Court of, I forget which state, it's somewhere, I think, out in the Midwest, but it's a doctrine that kind of spread across the country. States either tend to be Dillon rule or home rule where people kind of get together, they put together a town charter and tell the town or city or county what it can do. Dillon rule is the opposite. Dillon rule holds that a jurisdiction like ours, it only exists at the will of the state, that we're a subdivision of the state, that we don't have any power inherent to ourselves, that all power we have must come from the state. And so everything that we can do as a county government, it's a power that at some point the state legislature decided to give us that power, whether it be the power to have a police force, the power to pay our employees, the power to collect taxes. All of that comes from something that the state did and put down in code. Where we often see the impact of the Dillon rule, and we talk about it, is in our ability to diversify our revenue sources so that we're not as reliant on the real estate tax. So the state did give us a few new options recently, things like the meals tax, the admissions tax. They also gave us some greater flexibility in the rate we can set for our transient occupancy tax. But there's other tools that other jurisdictions, especially as we look across the Potomac into Maryland, income tax is something that those jurisdictions have access to. It's certainly a form of taxation that can be much less regressive than the real estate tax, but it's not something that we can do, as that's not something the state has given us authority to do. So then here, this is looking at the general fund again, that $5 billion that we tend to focus on and where the funding comes from. So focusing in, I mean, it's pretty clear where it comes from. 66% of our budget comes from real estate taxes. When you add on top of that personal property taxes and you look at that property tax category overall, we're over 80%. I think it's 81% right now of our budget is coming from real estate and personal property taxes. So certainly that this is something that the board continues to look at as far as are there ways to diversify those revenue sources, because many of our other revenue sources, when you look at things like sales tax, for example, we're limited there in the rate that we can set. And so there's no room to increase the rate there. It'll only be based on the actual sales that happen. And so to the degree that we're able to increase revenue, they keep on having to go back to that same well. Looking at the other side of the ledger, where our funding is spent, I know we tend to say that if you want to look at a community's priorities, you tend to look at its budget. Certainly over half of our budget goes to the Fairfax County Public Schools. Currently, I think it's 51.5% right now. When you add in health and human services as well as public safety, you get up to 75% of our budget. I'd note here, actually, we've labeled it pretty well here. Non-departmental is 10%, but that's actually employee benefits. And so to some degree, that 10% even is kind of spread out so elsewhere. That's supporting our health and human services employees, that's supporting our public safety employees as well. But again, you really see where our focus is based on where that spending is. So as I mentioned earlier, we tend to focus on those additions and subtractions to the budget each year. So while the total general fund budget is over $5 billion, when we were really working through it this past spring, we were focused on those deltas, the things that were going to change from the prior year. And so the conversation centered around much less than the $5 billion number, really around like $350 million. And so this table, it's a summary of the actions taken on the FY 2025 budget. It was a difficult budget year to work through. We had some significant needs for schools, for county employee compensation, for Metro and Connector. Also, as we work through this budget, just understanding where the budget was headed, we did a pretty intensive look at where we could find savings within the county government. We identified the equivalent of a little over a penny, about $36 million, I think it was, in savings through that process. That's baked into that. If you look near the bottom, that other priorities line, there's a lot going on in that line, and that's where we were able to use those savings to really fund just about everything else we need to do within the county government, whether it was some of the human services programs, some of the other needs like new facilities coming online, things like that. I'll say as well, as we work through the FY 2025 budget, it was a bit of an odd year in that I think it's definitely in my time with DMB, I think as long as any of my colleagues can remember, the year with the fewest adjustments from the board, from what we advertised, the staff developed budget versus what the board actually came forward with. And I think that was really a testament to the board looking at the budget and realizing that when you look at the big things that are in the budget, which is really schools and county employee compensation, and then again this year we had some pretty big needs within transportation, those kind of crowd out a lot of other things. And so I think when the board was looking at this budget, what they really focused in on was what they could do to alleviate the impact on taxpayers. And so most of their adjustments that they made to the budget were aimed towards reducing the increase in the real estate tax rate. We had initially proposed a 4-cent increase in the tax rate, and so they were able to bring that down to a 3-cent increase instead to fund what was in the budget. So then shifting a little bit, my office, we also manage the county's capital improvement program. So I have, I think it's 3 slides here that touch on our capital program and then the debt that also supports it. So the CIP, it's our plan for maintaining our current facilities as well as building new facilities. The schools has a CIP as well. The county CIP, it includes facilities like our police and fire stations, our libraries, our rec centers, community centers, stormwater facilities, wastewater facilities. I'm sure I'm forgetting a number of categories there. But those capital projects, we tend to support those by selling bonds. And so each November, we ask voters to give us authority to issue those bonds. We alternate each year between referenda for county bonds, and those happen in even years. We go out for schools in referenda in odd years. So this November, it'll be one of the county years. And so what you'll see on the ballot this year, it's a public safety facility bond, as well as a bond for capital requirements for the metro system. Although we alternate the referenda each year, which is the, again, getting that legal authority from the residents of the county, from the voters in the county, to sell bonds, to issue bonds. We actually sell the bonds each January. In each January, we sell a combination of both county and school bonds. And what we sell is based on the cash flow needs of the projects, really based on what's happening with construction in those. We don't want to sell the bonds too early and start paying interest on them before we actually need the cash to pay for what's happening. One of the things the board has done recently in order to address the backlog that we have in renovating facilities, we're seeing on the school side with the aging facilities there. We're also seeing it on the county side. I know in particular, like our parks rec centers, a lot of them were built around the same time, and those are expensive facilities that are coming up for renovation around the same time, and they really need some work. The board increased our bond sale limit, and they did this over a couple-year period. It previously was 300 million total between county and schools. They increased both sides of that ledger by 50 million to get us up to 400 million. This coming January will be the first time that we sell at that new limit. That limit, as well as many of our other financial policies, are codified into a document that we publish each year in our budget, which is the 10 Principles of Sound Financial Management. This is really the cornerstone of all of our financial policies. It lays out our debt policies. It also lays out some other things like our reserve policies, setting out how much we're required to keep within our reserve funds. Those policies then are very important, and we adhere to them very strictly. And the benefit of doing so is that it's allowed us to maintain a AAA bond rating from the 3 major bond rating agencies for decades now. That AAA rating is the highest rating possible. And because we have that rating, we are able to finance our capital projects at really the lowest interest rates that you can find out there on the market. We tend to kind of set the benchmark for what other similarly rated jurisdictions can get as far as interest rates. That then translates to saving millions of dollars each year on the financing costs of those capital projects and allows us to do that much more. So then this is the last slide in my deck before I open up to questions. As I said, we don't have a budget process going on, but I thought it was important just to throw out here kind of the touch points that we have within our budget process to provide input. Certainly, you know, as we work through the FY 2026 budget process, I find those budget town halls that they have in the districts to be a very great opportunity. Some of those have shifted to be on channel 16, which does kind of limit some of the interaction, but there still are a number of them that are being held either in person or virtually on Zoom or Teams, some platform like that. Those tend to be a great opportunity to actually interact with your district supervisor. Each district has at least one. Some of them hold a couple throughout the season. But it is a great opportunity to provide input directly to your board member. I think certainly they also welcome input through other means throughout, whether it be through, you know, emails, calls, visiting their office, or what other avenues that you all are familiar with, that you have, that you see them around. I know that they tend to be out in the community. Then we also have the budget public hearings. As I said, those typically are held over 3 days in mid-April. The dates do tend to float around a little bit based on, we try to work around the school spring break schedule, make sure that it's not during that when people are out of town. Those are the venue for individuals or groups to speak to the full 10-member board. It's definitely, you know, the more formal process for that. I would say one of the great things that we've been able to realize in this post-pandemic environment is kind of maintaining some of the benefits that we saw when we had to shift fully virtual for the public hearings, in that we still have the ability to provide testimony by phone and by YouTube. And then also during the budget season, we open up for comment through a few different other channels. We have a web form. We have the ability now to receive commentary by text, by email, as well as by phone, where it's essentially recording a voicemail that's transcribed, and then all that input being able to provide to the board directly. And then at the bottom, we have our budget website, which has all of our budget documents available. I didn't have a slide from it, but I was remembering I did want to just talk a little bit about 2026 and where we're headed, which it's kind of a tough time period right now, in that our last update to the board was the multi-year forecast that we include in the 2025 budget that looks ahead to 2026. We're certainly hoping to get some updated numbers and provide what I hope is going to be a better picture come November. I don't know that the picture is going to improve dramatically, though, in that we are expecting this to be another tough budget season. Hoping that we see better growth within the commercial side of real estate. But commercial real estate has been suffering over the past few years. One of the major stories there is the office elevator buildings, the big office buildings. They're getting hit with the shift to telework. Companies, as they're able to have employees teleworking, they're downsizing their footprints, which leads to increased vacancies. And so there's difficulties there. How that translates into the budget process is when we're raising revenue in order to pay for things, it would be much nicer if where the additional revenue was coming from were from businesses as opposed to from homeowners. So based on that dynamic, we are looking at this coming year being similar to last year. And so we are looking again at where we can look at county agencies, look at what's currently in the budget, trying to identify some good options for the board. That might be reductions, whether it be savings, whether it be changing the way that we do programs, things like that, hoping to soften that impact. But I would expect, as you see each year, that some of the biggest things that we see coming into this budget are going to be, of course, support for schools, support for our employees, whether it be through compensation as well as benefits. But then as well, we know that the metro picture, we continue to need more funding there. And so there's going to be some other big ticket items coming. The board has certainly, through their guidance, identified some of their continued priorities, affordable housing certainly being one of them. Currently, we have 1 cent on the tax rate dedicated to affordable housing. The board continues to have as their goal within the next 2 budget years, so by FY 2027, trying to get that up to 2 cents on the real estate tax rate. And certainly there's other priorities that they have out there that I know that are going to be on the table as we look ahead to 2026. But overall, with 2026, what I'm at least seeing at this point is going to be a year where we are going to be focused on kind of, again, covering our base, covering what we're currently doing, and the focus may not be as much on really program expansion or new programs. I'll leave it at that, and can bring down my screen as we go to questions. Oh, Les, you're muted there.
Thank you, Phil, for that. There was a lot of information there, and I encourage people to go to the Fairfax County website because there is so much that we can learn from about our budget process, which Phil's covered very well this evening. And we see the constraints that the county operates under when it comes to trying to promote programs that we might advocate. I'll start with one question. The budget hearings that go over 3 days where hundreds of people make their presentations over 5 minutes. Is that information actually given to the board members to read, evaluate, or is it just a part of the process that makes the public community feel that they've had some input?
It is.
The die already cast in effect, and regardless of whether it's what people mentioned at the hearing or not in April.
Right. So what I'll say about the public hearings, I mean, so they no matter what, they're a legal requirement. We need to go through them. The input is taken. I'll say the entire budget season, public hearings really do cap off the end of it. And so the board is listening to feedback from the community really as they go through the entire period there. And so they're hearing, again, at the budget town halls, they're hearing emails and voicemails and phone calls, and their staff are fielding all these things as well. And that's filtering up to them. Certainly when it gets to public hearings, they're there, they're listening. I know that also, if you're getting up to speak, you might see, 3 or 4 of them missing from the dais. They're taking breaks to go to the back room, but I guarantee I've been back there. They've got all the audio blaring back there. They've got TVs back there so that they step back there to, grab a bite to eat. They're still engaged with it. They're still listening to it. But I think by the time that you get to the budget public hearings, I think it also depends on kind of what flexibility there is in the budget. There's years where at the current tax rate, we would generate significant amounts of additional money that the board is really making decisions about. Do we bring down the tax rate? Do we fund programs? Those might be things where when you get to the public hearings, and if you're advocating for a program, they certainly have more flexibility to do something about it right then and there. In tight times like this, it's where I've seen things that have been successful that have really spurred change right then and there, of maybe the board hadn't heard about this at all from the community up until the night of the public hearings, have been some of the things where you end up with essentially something that's lower cost, that it's very clear what the solution could be. It's very clear that there's a problem. One of the ones that comes to mind was there was I forget where it was, but there was a sidewalk there was no sidewalk connection between a neighborhood and a park. And the road in between, not something that you'd really want to be walking on based on the conditions there. And so that was one where there were enough community members that pushed forward and said, hey, can we get a sidewalk here? And that was one where, it was something that the board was able to accommodate within the budget, within the funds that they had. It was obvious this needed to be done, and they were able to put that through. So I'll say there certainly are times, I have other examples that I could throw out where the board hears from, usually a number of folks right there at the public hearings, and they immediately take action to say, within this budget, we're going to do it. There's other times where public hearings for the 25 budget might be something that gets them thinking and gets them working towards something that comes forward in the 26 budget. So it's not always a snap thing. They are listening. It's just a matter of, you know, how big you have to turn the battleship right then and there in what you can accomplish based on what's available.
Right. Okay, thank you. There's some questions. There's a question asked by Elizabeth, who determines what are the county priorities? I don't know whether Elizabeth is still on the line. Maybe she might be able to expand on that, her question.
So, Elizabeth, if you want to jump in, you're welcome to, but I'll say the priorities are really set by the board. You know, the board being our representatives as residents of the county, they are the ones who are intending to you know, kind of distill what the community is feeling, what needs are in the community, and putting those forward. And so they're certainly driving what our overall priorities are. And so that's a big thing, especially as we're looking at program expansions, at new programs. A lot of that's going to be driven by, again, what the board has identified as those priorities, which is based on what they're hearing from the community. You know, we certainly have other things that come forward that I would certainly label as priorities that may not be things that, you know, you as a community member are too gung-ho for, and that if we hear from the Department of Finance that based on workload, we need another accountant, that's going to end up being a priority. We have those workload things that come up as well, just based on what we're seeing, where we're seeing demand for county services that, you know, may not be the flashy things, but they're still things that we realize we need to take action on. And we try to make sure that we do that to make sure that all of our agencies continue running and providing the services that our community needs.
Thank you.
Another question is the money received through bonds included in the general budget? I think you had a diagram on that showing how funding is.
So we cannot issue debt. We can't sell bonds in order to finance our operations. Again, that's the bonds is, you know, really we're committing ourselves to paying the money in the future. The only way that we're allowed legally to use that funding is on capital construction and things related to the capital construction. And so the money from selling bonds would be included in that like $10 billion number. It does not go into the general fund because that's one of those instances where, because the revenue from selling bonds has a legal restriction on it, we want to segregate that into its own fund and make sure that that money is only used for that purpose. And so it's in there, it's just not in the 5 billion that we tend to talk about directly. There are then, when we pay debt service on that money, debt service as well is handled within another fund, but we pay debt service out of the general fund. And so we make a transfer to our debt service fund in order to handle paying that debt each year. So you'll see, again, that kind of the mortgage payment show up in the general fund. The actual revenue from selling the bonds is over in, again, those special funds dedicated to capital construction.
Thank you. One other question. What is an admissions tax? I think that was showing on one of your charts as well.
It is. So the admissions tax, as well as the meals tax, and then there's also a probate tax. Those are the three areas where we currently have authority that the board has not implemented those revenue sources. So an admissions tax is really a tax on any place where you would pay admission to get into something. And so think like movie theaters, shows, I'm sure there's some other examples that I'm not thinking of. It tends to exclude charitable purposes, so events held by like nonprofits, but it would be tax on those, the price of admission to those sorts of things. Just to cover the others, I mean, meals tax is, I know we had the referendum a few years ago. The legislature has now given all jurisdictions the ability to levy a meals tax without going to referendum. The board would have to just go through and make that decision and approve it. A meals tax is a tax on prepared food. So it tends to be food at a restaurant. When you go to the grocery store, it's not going to cover your groceries. If you hit like the salad bar at a grocery store, it would hit those. And then probate tax, the state currently levies a probate tax on wills when they're probated. There's certainly limitations on that. The county has the authority to implement. It would be a third of what the state charges we could do as a tax. Again, those are ones that currently are not done.
All right, thank you for that explanation. I do not see any more questions in the chat. And if there are none, I think we want to thank you for your time and really an education, certainly for me. I have more questions, but I love this stuff. But again, our organization really appreciates your taking the time to speak to us and giving this solid foundation on the Fairfax County budget process. And thank you again.
All right. Well, thank you for having me here. I've certainly enjoyed talking to everybody. And Les, if you have those questions, feel free to follow up with me.
I will.
All right, and go Gators.
Thank you. I'm sorry. Thank you so very much, Mr. Hagen. Can you put in the chat, if you don't mind, a way for our general membership body to contact you if they have any questions? Or do you have an assistant or someone within your office who can answer residents' questions?
Let me make sure I get the right thing, but we do have a general email address that our staff will go through and triage. So let me grab that for you.
And let's all give Mr. Hagen a round of applause for taking time out of his evening to speak with us. We're very appreciative for you for doing that. Thank you again.
Yeah, we're sitting comfortably in our homes while I don't know how long your commute is.
Yes, indeed. All righty. So if there is nothing else, I would like to call the meeting to adjourn. I'd like to make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
I move we adjourn the meeting.
If
I'll
Sujata
second.
doesn't make a motion for anything, she gonna make a motion in second to adjourn. Thank you. All in favor of adjourning the meeting, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed,
Aye.
nay. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. All opposed, nay. Any abstains? The ayes have it. The meeting is adjourned. I will stay on for those who are interested in joining the committee. For those who want more information on the events that we have coming up. And if you just have any general questions about the Fairfax County NAACP, I'll stay on. Mike, can you stay on real quick?
Oh, can I say something on the form to respond to Saturday's event? There's only yes